Welcome back to another episode. I'm so excited to have you back. I have Matthias Schwenteck with me today, and I'm a huge fan of his work. I truly believe it is a path for deeper, intimate relating. He's been traveling and teaching internationally since 2010, and he's a trained facilitator in the fields of sacred sexuality and Tantra. And he's been working with different healing modalities such as counseling, guided meditation, and bodywork for well over 20 years. His sessions and teachings are grounded in the background of trauma research and neurophysiology, and he considers himself a student of life. In 2011, he found his calling within somatic practices and consent and has been studying and fine-tuning this work ever since. It was in 2019 that he founded the Somatic Consent Engagement System, and since then he's been dedicating his life to guiding thousands of people through this evolutionary process. I am so excited for this conversation, and without further ado, here's Matt. Matt, thank you so much for being here with me. I'm super excited to present somatic consent to everyone listening. You have such a diverse background, and every time I was studying, I caught myself studying, I just kept going deeper and deeper in a subject that I find should be like common knowledge for everybody, just this way of interacting and relating that allows for so much more depth and intimacy. And so I'm so excited to discover this with you. So you have studied broad backgrounds like from shamanism to tantra to trauma. So why don't we start off with first understanding what is somatic consent, and what would you say is the root of why we need somatic consent?
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me to your podcast. And it sounds like you're very excited and passionate about this entire material.
Yes.
Pretty much the same like I am since almost 20 years. And going into this direction where I'm going into the, it's getting more and more specific and clearly and expressive about what it really is. And to answer your question, what is somatic consent, is a very clear dynamic that is narrowed down to 4 different qualities, and 2 qualities of them belong to the somatic experience, what is pretty much the sensory division, so everything that we can perceive with our skin and what we feel, in combination with the motor division, so with impulses that is from our motor cortex sending signals into our body, into our limbs to move and go into an action. Mm-hmm. And then when we are clear with what our action is, then we can divide that when our action is happening. For example, if an action from my side, from my impulse would come towards you, is that action for you or is it an action for me? And what is clarifying that is the dynamic of consent. And consent you can divide into more divisions. One division of consent is either I have permission that when my action goes towards you that I can touch you, or the second part of consent is we have an agreement that my action is based on your request, that I'm doing what you want. So when my hand is coming towards you, is my hand doing what I want, or is my hand doing what you want? And if my hand is doing what I want, can I feel myself? Or am I trying to do an action to get a response out of you, what would give a complete different neurological experience in your body?
Wow, that's actually so fascinating, because this reminds me of times when, when my husband has massaged me, thinking like he's doing something for me, but in the meantime, I'm feeling a little bit like, oh, that's not the right spot or whatever. And you're right, this kind of there wasn't that consent, this understanding of who it was for and how it was supposed to be directed. So I see what you mean with the somatic consent. So because this really comes down to and I thought this was so interesting when you said this at the very beginning of a conversation or another interview. You had said that we've kind of adapted to non-consensual touch. Like, because when we're little and, when we're all children, sometimes we're forced into giving that stranger a hug, hello, or goodbye, or sometimes we get lifted and picked up in when we don't really want it or need it. And so this feels like it lays a big foundation to what you're the somatic consent topic, in the sense of like, how do we really adapt to non-consensual touch, and how does that have effects later in life?
Hmm. Yeah, it's pretty true what you say. And even in the best case, each one of us has been touched against our will before we could speak, so pre-verbal. So
Mm,
that meant we have learned that what is happening to us is more important how we feel about it before we can actually form our own thoughts and express them.
yeah.
And even if that hasn't happened in the best way, that the caretaker have done something to us to protect us, it still feels in our nervous system more important what is happening than how we feel about that. And because
Mm,
of that, most of us trying to change how we feel when stuff is happening instead of changing what is happening when we can make a choice. So now as adults, where we have adapted kind of 15, 20, 25, 30 years of this behavior going along with stuff that is happening because we still are in the belief system what is happening is more important than how we feel about that, that our capacity of noticing our impulses, what we really want, and making choices about what we don't want and expressing that accordingly and saying what we want is pretty narrowed down. And this is what somatic consent is literally breaking open, that we're coming back to this
mm.
place of that I have a choice how I want to be touched, and I have the rights to express that, and I have the right to express that if something is happening to me that I don't like.
Mm. Oof, I love this, and this gets me so excited because it's true. And for me, I've had the most trouble, like in my past and in my growth, in sexual encounters as well, because it's when I'm most intimate with someone. So we'll probably touch on that a little bit later, but I love how that really changes the dynamic and how that opens up for more permission to, like you mentioned, I think it's really focus on the interior of the experience, the personal experience. So I wanted to ask you, because creating sovereignty over our body, which is like what you're saying, some somatic consent really creates sovereignty. So that feeling of ownership of our own needs and desires. So on the path of using somatic consent, like how does it all shape together so we can really feel sovereign over our bodies?
Hmm. Great question. So somatic consent in itself, to bring this four different dynamics together, is forming the system that I have there in the background
Mm-hmm.
in that picture. And most people who are looking at that, when they're kind of cognitive, kind of sharp, they can see that there are different dynamics. It's your action or their action. Is it for me? Is it for you? And if there is not an agreement, then we operate out of survival mechanisms. And this is what most people feeling very excited about, this dynamic in a concept. And what I like to say is that the concept in itself doesn't make absolutely no sense. Yeah. And
Mm-hmm.
literally doesn't make
Yeah.
sense because we have to use our senses first to opening up the sensory inflow, so that in the first place, to really understanding what the dynamics are and coming to the foundation of this dynamic, is
Mm-hmm.
that we have to learn to feel with our hands, with our skin in the first place, to learn that we can choose an action that is towards a felt sense that is for ourselves when we do that. And if this is not in place, so the inflow and the action for us, if this is not in place, the entire system doesn't make sense and is confusing people more than it's actually empowering people. So that's the start, the sensory inflow.
Interesting. Actually, just I wanted to clarify that little piece. So, do you mean, like, for example, the fact that we can also derive pleasure from our action in terms of us giving pleasure? Is that what you mean?
This is the core feature, the core dynamic. So, you know, let's say as little infants,
Mm-hmm.
pre-verbal, we have all the capacity. So we're taking something in our hand, we're feeling it up, we making sense with the world around us. So our hands have more nerve ending than anywhere else in our body, or except our mouth and our genitals, that that the sensory inflow of our hands are literally kind of polled for us to uh, distinct between giving and receiving. Yeah, so as little infants, we are pure receiver by action, because we need that inflow to develop our social engagement system, making connection and kind of learning to know what's good, what's right, what's wrong. And in the second place, the dynamic of giving doesn't function when we're little.
Yes.
We are all kind of oh, give me a second. There's a word here. Selfish little pricks, so to
Yeah.
say.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
And
all about us.
this is really, really important. And then through this absorbing our world and just like learning life through our senses, through our skin, through our hands, then we're getting a condition on top of that, what's right and what's wrong, and that our receiving as little princes and princesses is wrong, and that we then put a giving dynamic on top of that to belong and being accepted and acknowledged. So instead of doing and receiving, we're learning somehow very early that doing and receiving becomes wrong or bad, and then we're putting a conditioning on top of that, that our action to provide something is more important than actually using the inflow and feeling ourselves. And this, as a neurological pathway, this is where somatic consent is tapping back into, to use that, but not as a selfish prick, more like as a sensory being that can still make connection by choice with the world and with other human beings, with other bodies.
Like it doesn't have to flow just one way. It's a reciprocal. It's like always consistently flowing in both directions.
Yeah, so
Sounds
when you
like.
see it from a place of neurophysiology, from the neuro feedback loop, the way how two people literally engage, it's always a co-creating feedback loop.
Yeah.
And there's always the dynamic of giving and receiving simultaneously happening from both sides. But as some people have that less developed in their nervous system, their capacity of doing and receiving is diminished, that they can actually, that they can't reach out and do something for themselves, so that they're dependent on somebody else doing something to them that is meaningful. So that the doing and so the giving and receiving dynamic simultaneously is not really functioning well in most relationships. So there are kind of little survival strategies and adaptive pattern of behavior kind of inwoven and entwined, instead of being really clearly with the foundation of, I have the right, I can use my body to reach out in action and feel what I want to feel. And when this is simultaneously activated in two people, then the pure giving and receiving can happening, and this upward spiral into a higher dimension, neurologically, if you want to say so, or spiritually in unified consciousness, that can just naturally happen.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so we have to go deeper into this. This is so interesting, because this is so fundamentally different than anything I've ever learned growing up, which was, hey, like, if you do something, I did something to get something, like you were saying. It wasn't just for me. And oftentimes, even today, making time for myself, to give myself something, to anything that would essentially mean giving myself pleasure, was always a little bit more difficult, because it felt selfish and it felt but it seems like, from what you're saying, that is the base of it all.
Yes, it is.
Wow. So what other like conditioned ways of relating come up, as well as if we were to dig deeper on this, like what are some of the other common ways of relating that come up, that really interrupt our way to make meaningful connection?
Yeah, one of the main dynamics that is happening is that, as you said that before with your husband, for example, just imagine that one part of a relationship dynamic is just wanting to learn the good tricks that has been taught in a course somewhere, you know, for
Mm-hmm.
example, how to make your partner orgasm.
Yes.
And what is happening then, they just come from a place of love and care, and they just want to provide something for their partner to make them happy. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But neither the partner has really requested that, or they have complained that there is not enough knowledge or enough wisdom or practice, or the partner who is trying to work it out has not made an offer. So just imagine your partner want to surprise you, is going to a course to make you orgasm better. Yeah. And then in the first place, just like he learned the tricks and the techniques and the skills, and tries to touch you the way how he saw that in the video or in the demonstration about the master who is doing it. Yeah.
Totally.
And then you think, okay, so he's doing something, okay, so I'm just letting him do it. And you might think he is doing it for himself, and you just go along and let him do what he is doing. And
Yes.
it kind of feels okay-ish. And then he thinks this is all for you, and he has learned the right things and wanted to have the response that he likes to get. So
Mm.
you are giving him access to your body, and you letting him do what you think he want to do, and he is doing what he want to do. No, sorry, he is doing what he thinks he has to do to make you happy. So both are giving, and nobody is really receiving in the dynamic.
Wow.
And this is the so-called downward spiral. So the important piece in here is, and this is what I've seen over decades in relationship dynamics, when this downward spiral is happening, so that the person who is being done to
Mm-hmm.
and giving access is putting themselves in a violated, victimized position. And the moment they're putting themselves in the position of being violated and victimized, they're putting their partner automatically in the opposite dynamic of the violator and the abuser. But the
Fascinating.
person who is
Mm-hmm.
doing the action thinks they are in service, and they're doing it for their
Mm.
partner, and um, and they thinking that the person they're doing it to is entitled and constantly in control and not able to surrender to their action. And this gives a relationship not that is on one point not capable to unwind anymore.
Wow, yes, because you know what? It's interesting because this is goes like so beyond just like sexually. Like this is also with everything that we share with our partners and people that are most intimately close to us, is that essence of that thinking that I'm going to do this for someone without having requested it or asked whether it was something that they would enjoy. So it's like very innocent and wanting like very heartfelt in a way, but at the same time there's this lack of communication and connection in terms of what it should be. So this is where somatic consent really comes in, I guess.
Yes, this is where it really comes in. So let's say we are all loving and caring beings, and we
Hmm.
want the best for our partner. Yeah.
Mhm.
And that we just all want to give from a full heart to make the other person having a good time.
Yes.
Yeah. And by acknowledging and appreciating that we all caring and loving beings, that how can we provide from a place that our action as a gift is um, uh, landing in a place of our partner, that this is received as such.
Mm. Hmm.
And this is the big question everywhere. And then when people ask, so how do I translate and how do I do that, to come back to the dynamics of, before you can give your gift fully, you
Hmm.
have to put your gift aside to find what receiving fully is. Oh, 1 second here, I have okay.
No
So
problem.
that you have to find what receiving fully is. So when you know what receiving really is, then
Mm.
you can put your receiving aside and then give without the need of getting anything back. So that your giving is not conflated with receiving. So,
Wow.
and this only happens by learning to receive fully first, and that's the action by the
Mm.
sensory inflow. And that needs, when you just learn to play a music instrument,
Yes.
So people say, now I have found it, now I know how it feels. And then I say, okay, now you have pretty much bought a guitar and some notes. And now you need a couple of thousands of hours to practice.
Yeah.
The music
Yeah.
comes through you.
Wow. That's actually incredibly fascinating because it reminds me of this concept of like really feeling comfortable in your yes, like a full yes and a full no.
Yes.
Because oftentimes, we say yes. Well, at least I know as a woman, and the often what we hear is that women have a hard time saying no, and I'm sure that goes both for men and women or everybody in general. So the reason I ask is because this probably relates a lot to having the capacity to say yes and no comfortably.
Yes, it's pretty much the same dynamic. So we cannot have a full yes if we don't have a full no.
Yeah.
Because if we have access to a full no, then we can fully express a full yes. If we can't say no, then our yes is probably inflated with a no, and with all kind of conditions and beliefs around that. So that's the same dynamic with giving and receiving. To learn to fully give, we have to receive first and stop giving for a while till we can fully put our receiving aside
Hmm.
and giving from a pure place.
Wow, I just love this. So I'm so excited about this. So I want to ask you about how safety plays a role in all of this, because I think largely a lot of these behaviors are conditioned behaviors might have come from, learning it from our outside world, but a lot of also as children, like we really just want to belong. We need the love and we're dependent on it. So a lot of maybe our behavior comes from this needing to feel safe and loved, and so, how does safety play in our ability to interact with others, particularly like intimate relationships?
Yeah, I mean, safety is one of the features the that we just need in our nervous system to literally engage with other people. And I like to say it from that place: there's nothing existing like safety. So
Mm,
safety in general doesn't exist, but there's a sense of relatively safety in our nervous system that we can achieve to making choices that are meaningful to us,
mm,
and we can literally co-regulate ourselves with other people, that they feel safe with us, that they can make the choices about their desire and their benefits that they choose to have. So it's pretty much and I'm a total geek around Stephen Porges' work, the polyvagal theory.
mm-hmm,
What is the social engagement system? And the
mm,
social engagement system is the way how you and I, for example, communicate with eye contact. And we have a kind of a melodic, soothing voice that you literally hear. So there's nothing that I would just put onto you. So if I
mm-hmm.
would change my voice and get really aggressive and tell you what to do and to think, that would automatically, your nervous system shift into a place of defense and protection. What is a
Yes.
survival strategy? And
Yeah.
this survival strategy needs to come up for your personal behavior to literally, um, well, survive is not really a thing here because you're not really under life threat, but you would literally feel compromised in your personality.
Interesting.
So safety is something that is based on two people that engage and can co-regulate with each other into a place of that both can make choices about what's going to happen, and what's beneficial for both, where both are winning, where not one person is taking benefit and the other person is making a long, lonely face.
Oh gosh, and you know what? Just for everyone listening, can you just describe what co-regulation means?
Co-regulation would be, there are three different dynamics. One is dysregulation.
Mm-hmm.
So dysregulation is when your nervous system is switching from a place of choice, of connection and safety, in a place of dissociating, of danger, of running away, and of fear. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that would be a dysregulation. And then A co-regulation is, for example, we learn that in early age with our caregiver, with our mother, for example, when our nervous system is co-regulated, dysregulated in that way that I just described, that so we have this soothing and carrying voice from our caregiver, oh, it's all good, yeah. So the heartbeat, the connection, the voice, so that one nervous system can co-regulate itself through somebody else's nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
And when we learn to co-regulate ourselves through another person,
Mm-hmm.
when we're dysregulated, then we can learn to self-regulate without somebody else. So we learn self-regulation through co-regulation
Mm-hmm.
when we have dysregulated. Now, that's an ongoing, constant dynamic in our nervous system with people all the time around us.
Oh my gosh. So this isn't just like the first relationship with our mothers, just to pick a relationship. It's like later in life as well. Like in order to regulate, we also need to constantly be co-regulating with people we're intimate with.
Yes. Yeah.
Fascinating. Okay. That's really, really interesting because I've only come to really discover safety as something like is at the base of everything. Is like it's more important than I had ever thought of. Particularly because, you know, when things are taken care of for you and you live in a modern society, you think, okay, well, I'm relatively safe. But it's funny how that is like it's emotional. It's also, do you feel safe emotionally and like in your ability to take decisions? So I'd love to understand like how can we create that relative safety you're talking about, that those like pockets of safety with other people.
Yeah, an important piece is that I would say is that we have all to acknowledge that we have a right and a responsibility within ourselves, and this right and responsibility, this right of um, um, uh, the right of self-care, self-love, so what we have a responsibility for and a right to, that is pretty much our individual self-discovery that we have to find in ourselves. And that starts in my understanding with coming back to this receiving inflow. So when this is activated, then we have a self-regulating, self-caring, loving capacity in our nervous system. So, and in there we have to acknowledge that individually, that I have a right to my body, to my feelings, to my thoughts, to my beliefs. And when I can acknowledge that within myself, then I have to admit that everybody else around me has the same rights, so that I cannot put any of my, what is in my base, in my domain, in my what I have a right and responsibility for, I cannot put that in somebody else's in, and nobody else can put theirs into mine. So this gives literally sovereignty that nobody else can put their feelings, their thoughts, their beliefs, or physical action I have not agreed to into me or onto me, because this belongs to me and to nobody else. So when I can claim that for myself, in this moment, everybody else will have the same right and the same responsibilities.
Wow. Wow, that's really taking ownership of oneself. Like that's
Radical self-responsibility, yes, that's pure ownership.
wow. It's wow. That must be a journey to getting there and taking full ownership for everything and really not, like you said, like that, putting it on somebody else as well. But this brings up like one of the questions which in moments like, and I'm sure this happens, dynamic happens all the time. It's definitely happened to me personally where you don't necessarily feel safe, but you don't want to say no because you're uncomfortable. And so it's a question of safety or being able to be honest. And you have early defense mechanisms that come up. I think you'd mentioned them. They're part of the polyvagal theory. What are some of those that come up? What are the most prominent ones that we see in relationships? These early defense mechanisms.
Yeah, I think one of the early defense mechanisms that we have is that we have to do something to belong. So we have to give something, we have to provide something to make something work. So that we taking the responsibility to make another person happy, instead of letting them be and feel where they are and how they are. So instead of changing something that we are not comfortable with that is happening in other people, is coming into that place of being present and creating enough spaciousness around us that people can have the experience that they want to have, and empowering them into that place that they have ownership about what they want to receive, and empowering them to express accordingly what they need and what they want, instead of us trying to fill a hole to make something work.
Oh my God. That one's deep. At least for me, it's so true. It's even almost like the feeling of filling silences, right? That feeling of feeling uncomfortable. That's really, really powerful. It's funny how we do so many things just to feel safe. Like so many little things come up just in order to feel like we belong. It's fascinating. And so, in the same window, because the safer we feel, you have this concept called like the window of tolerance. And I loved the way you phrased it, and I loved how you described it. So I kind of want to touch on that right now, because I find that obviously this window of tolerance grows the more comfortable and safe we feel. So could you go in, and just for everybody listening, the window of tolerance is the zone, your comfort zone is another way of putting it. So can you explain to us how the relationship between the window of tolerance and early defense mechanisms play, and how we can expand and contract them over our lifetime?
So in the window of tolerance, there are two different dynamics when we're just getting out of the window. That is the so-called hypoactivity and the hyperactivity. So the so-called shutdown mechanism, so the so-called collapse, and on the other side, the fight-flight response. And when we are in these two places of fight, flight, or shutdown, there is one part in our brain, in our neocortex, in the frontal lobe, that is deactivated, and that's that part where we can make choices. So when we literally outside, with both feet outside of the window of tolerance, then there is no way we can making empowered choices, because our nervous system is choosing to get back into a place of safety, and that's totally legitimate. So we need to have that. Our nervous system needs to do that. So, and when we only in the window of tolerance, in the comfort zone, everything is good, and everything is ease, and kind of, there is no development, there's no evolving possible. And so that all the traumatic experience that people have and think that trauma and shutdown is something evil is actually a misconception. So as humans, or as the species of mammals, we need to have these traumatic experiences in our nervous system to literally evolve and give our experience in form of co-regulation further to the next generation, so that we have a developmental structure that we can go on a higher level of consciousness. So so we need trauma.
Really, we do? Okay.
We do. Otherwise, if we would only be in the window of tolerance, we would not develop. That we would not thrive. So the important piece is here that we can neither force trauma to evolve and develop. That wouldn't work either. So the way how the window works, in my understanding, is that when we are in engagement with other people in another situation, in an environment that we're feeling challenged, or maybe we're feeling kind of confronted, that when we cannot make a choice here, then we know that it's probably not really for evolution and development. Is it? It might is, but we don't know yet. Sometimes we have to go a full loop through a circle of traumatic experience to come out on the other side. And then we know for the next time in a similar situation, we have learned something here.
Mm.
So, but we cannot push this in our nervous system. We cannot push that on other people either. So how that works is between the push and the pull is when we pushing ourselves into something or somebody else is pushing us into something, we might or we might not having a benefit out of that. But when we're feeling there's an experience like where we're feeling an excitement, where we're feeling something that feels kind of, yeah, oh my God, that's just like on the edge, but you know, but there is this excitement, this level of joy that I want to experience that, and this is it feels scary, but I want to try it, and if it's not for me, I can still stop it. But if I have to push myself through, now I have to do that, and I have to just have the experience, and then there is no learning after that. This is what most people know as the push. But the pull is that you, from the window of tolerance, you step 1 foot out in the scarcity in something dangerous,
Mm-hmm.
and you have 1 foot in. And whenever you have your foot out and you just notice, okay, this is how much I can actually handle here, and I put my foot back in. So there's this kind of the like the zone of equilibrium where you can actually evolve and thrive instead of going into complete shutdown or in a life threat situation where you might die,
Yes.
or you just um, um, choose to just come back into this place, say, well, this was really scary, but you know, I had my parachuter and I probably would have not survived if I wouldn't have taken that one with me.
Wow. So it seems really like everything happens in increments. It's the way to approach it, or I guess the way to prevent. Well, like you said, you can't really force it or push it or make it happen, but essentially it feels it is are you suggesting the pull? Like is the pull a healthier approach to expanding it because it feels more I don't want to say control, but it would feel more a relatively smaller experience.
Yeah, let's take the example from the consent lab,
Okay.
right? So this is well designed in this way. So I need to change that into the online format because in this pandemic, it's not kind of gatherings are possible. But when I'm sitting together with people in a gathering,
Yeah.
we are a group of 20 people, like we did that similar in the online lab, is where I'm as a space holder, as a facilitator, create a space that is relatively safe, that people can choose whatever they want to choose. And that means maybe they just sit and observe. Nobody has to do anything at any time,
Yes.
so that there is no pushing. And if you just want to leave in the middle of it because you're getting overwhelmed, please, you know, if somebody chooses to leave, I recognize I have created enough safety that somebody else could choose to leave because they were not comfortable and they could not stay. So
Wow. Okay.
there are all these levels of creating safety. You know where the bathroom is. You know everything is optional, and nobody has to do anything if they don't want to do. And then we're creating this dynamic based on who is in the room. And if somebody is requesting something to you, whatever that is, you can say no to everything. I actually encourage you to say no if you're not having a full yes. So some
Mm.
people come to lab to say no to everything at any time.
Yeah.
But then here it comes when you feel, oh my God, there is this hot person over there. And I
This is
don't know,
cutie. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, this cutie. And I don't know what to do, but I just want to try. And I would so love to lean against their shoulder and asking that person, can you just hold my face and stroke it gently? And then I still want to try that, but I'm scared of being rejected. And even if you're feeling rejected, you know that you have owned your desire because the other person needed to take care of their limit to some degree. There might be in a relationship, there might be not feeling comfortable with you or whatever, but you still own your desire. And then in the moment, you actually speak it up and say, okay, I have a request to you. For 3 minutes, can I lean my head against your shoulder and you hold my face and tell me that I'm beautiful? And then the person said, well, yeah, I'm totally willing to do that.
Wow.
This is a pull. A push would be just like, oh, yes, I should do that now, and because I need that so much, you have to provide that, and this won't work.
Oh, fascinating. I love that. It's true that it still requires that ownership of the desire.
Yes, 1 second, I just see my battery is going down.
No problem.
Oh, sorry, I was actually sure I plugged it in. I haven't. It's good that I saw that.
Yeah, it's no problem. But actually, I really wanted to segue into understanding more of your story before we even dive deeper into somatic consent. So, what got you down this path, and what do you have a reason why you love and why you do what you do?
Yeah, great question. So, oh God, how many days do you want to have?
That's awesome.
I'll just give you the short version. I had a tantric awakening that is about 23 years ago, and something happened to me that was waking me up out of the reproductive, addictive conditioning of just procreation. So specifically as a male, kind of having as many orgasms as I think I should have.
Yeah.
And that orgasm was just only based on ejaculation. And I woke up out of that. So my nervous system made a complete change out of that. And I noticed that my body was capable of feeling things that I couldn't felt before. And I could not explain that. I could not share that with people. I just called that Tantra. And I was just like digging in a realm of the unexplainable. And I went on a path of finding answers. And everything that was interesting to me was part of my evolution and of my development. So what my tantric awakening was, I'm still a very sexual ecstatic being, and specific what I really love about the tantric approach is that, and there's one saying about that, imagine you can be desireless on a peak of a desire. And when you just translate that into sexual encounter while you're with your partner in lovemaking, most people think that the most beautiful moment in lovemaking is when there is a simultaneous climax.
That's like the goal.
It's the goal, right? And then after the goal is over, you have a few minutes of cuddling, and then you have all the neurotransmitter moving in your body, and then okay, back to work and all that stuff. Just imagine in this moment, just short before this climax, you are present and conscious with the person you're engaging with, and you have the capacity of like pushing a pause button. Yes. And you can engage as long as you like into this extremely beauty of ecstatic energy with each other, and both of you consciously choose not the desire on the peak of desire. So how that looks is that when we choosing the climax, when we choosing the gratification of the desire, then we literally choosing the path of, I call that a dopamine hype. But when you choose to push the pause button, then you choose a place of relaxed arousal, relaxed expansion. That's the oxytocin pathway. And in the oxytocin pathway, you can break it down into the sensual, connective way of physical engaging that is similar to the action and the inflow simultaneously. So that, and that's by saying again, we have more nerve ending in our hand than anywhere else in our body except our mouth and our genitals. That includes, we have more nerve ending in our genitals than anywhere else in our body. So when we can use our genitals as sensual, receiving body parts, we have the capacity to bypass the reproductive climax of procreation and can expand into a transformative experience through feeling ourselves simultaneously with our beloved. And that's where that stuff becomes really phenomenal. And this is why I'm so passionate about that, because now I have a language for that and I can break it down, that people can go on that journey without giving it kind of in terms that nobody understands.
Yes, because it's often either very spiritual jargon that pushes people away, or yes, it's very true. It's like it's always been the language and the wow. This is really, really fascinating to be desireless at the peak. Definitely not something easy to find even today. It's like we're constantly driven and, in fact, fueled by our desires. I'd say that's essentially what we push. We're a society that pushes.
Yeah, mainly we are pushed in the gratification of satisfying our desire, and then on one point we have to admit that we will come to that point is where, like Mike Jagger song, I can't get no satisfaction. Yeah, because in this infinite expansion of our nervous system into oneness, there is no satisfaction. There's this unified consciousness, and we're just merging into this place. And that's the highest realm we can go with somebody else, into this endless connection in the moment. That's where the beauty is in my perception.
Oh my gosh, yeah. It's funny. Something just like made a lot of sense for me there. It's really, really interesting that you said that, because it's like, you know how they say and they always make these parallels about like it's all about the journey, which is obviously not necessarily what you're saying, but it's essentially, it's not about the objective at all. It's not about the end. This so-called end, as in like this illusion. Fascinating. Oh my goodness. Okay. So thank you for sharing your story with us. This is really interesting, because now you've been on this journey for quite some time, right?
Yeah, 23 years or so.
Wow. Yes. So I wanted to go back a little bit, because you mentioned a lot about touch and how, you know, it engages our motor sensory system. And then, so because you teach somatic consent through touch, and obviously that's a big part of it for the somatic piece that you had said. So when we talk about us being a gift, like me being a gift as an individual, what do you mean by that, and why is that?
You know, the most beautiful piece of that is when you recognize on this point that you don't have to do or to give anything to be. So then everything that you already are without providing anything is already enough. So you are already a gift without doing anything to prove your value to be. And that's true for everyone. And when you know how to fill up your cup through the doing and receiving part, so when you know through self-love and self-care how to be that gift, then you can give yourself as that gift into the world without needing anything back to belong. Then you provide because you have, and you give because you can. And what the other people doing with you as a gift is their choice. But you don't need to provide or push anything on anybody to prove anything.
Oh, wow, that's touching. Actually, I really felt that in my heart. And it's, you mentioned there a key, and I think in today's society we often toss around the words self-love and self-care. So what does that look like? What does that really mean when we say self-care and self-love?
So self-love is in the first place that we are all capable of using the sensory inflow and filling ourselves up so that we just actually know how to um, um, receive. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And from that place, I just lost the plot. Sorry, there was in your question, there was a second part and I just lost.
Yeah, no worries. No, it's about self-love and self-care and what it actually means. Like what does that in what does it really mean to self-love and self-care so that it actually builds a beautiful foundation from which to be a gift, to already be the gift and to give because you can.
Hmm. Hmm. I just notice I have a heat wave coming in and I'm blushing a little bit. So I just feel my heart is slightly beating.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a blackoutness in my head.
Mm.
And there is this place of I don't have to prove anything anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It is this place of full self-acceptance with everything that is within myself,
Mm-hmm.
the entire spectrum of all feelings, vulnerability, insecurity, the unknowing,
Mm-hmm. Mm.
and full self-acceptance.
Wow.
That's self-love.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. It's sounds it feels like you said like a fountain from which to give from when you feel this way. It must feel like, but is it again, and you know what, it's interesting because I catch myself wanting to ask you whether that's attainable, but again I feel like this is me making it or wanting to make it into something um of an objective, so to speak, which essentially means I'm not accepting of the way things are. I feel it's fascinating because you also have this concept you talk about, which is like the numbness bar. Because you just talked a lot about like really feeling our emotions and allowing them to be in full acceptance. And can you talk to us a little bit about how the numbness bar plays a role in our life and how that can lead to more self acceptance?
Yeah, the numbness bar is a beautiful work that comes from a teacher from Clinton Callahan from possibility management. So everybody who has interest in that, check that out. It's great work. So the numbness bar is that piece that we all learn to adapt ourselves to not feel too much. So we have created a level of numbness in ourselves to a certain degree that we um, um, getting away from feeling what's going on in our body, and feelings, they are based on our four um, emotional expressions. What is fear, sad, anger, and joy. And because our numbness bar is so high that we have to, when stuff is happening on this level of feelings, that we have to go to a certain intensity that we actually can feel something. And because people are so afraid of their own emotional landscape, that their feelings are so suppressed through conditioning, that, for example, anger has to rise up to this level of intensity that we explode in rage. And that makes anger negative. And the same with fear. So we have to go in fear so intensely that we have to implode in panic or explode in panic. And the same with sadness, with intense grieving, or with joy, with this super freaking out on ecstasy. Yeah. So that we always have to reach and go to this high level that we just can feel something. So the idea is, with the numbness bar, is to acknowledge that we all live on this high level of numbness, trying not to feel anything. And when we can acknowledge that this numbness bar is super high up, on maybe 80% of engagement, then what are we doing with all these feelings below that? And where are we honest and radical, responsible for expressing the low level feelings when they occur? For example, bring it down to 50% or to 20% or maybe 10%, that as soon a feeling occurs, that we're expressing that. Oh my God, when you just said that, I just feel just joy. Oh my God, I'm just feeling a little bit anger about this and that. So ownership in I form, I feel this and that, that our feelings on a lower level, on a as low as possible, becomes an indicator for emotional fluency and emotional intelligence to express ourselves in the present moment with that what is, instead of rationalizing and bringing it on a cognitive level and trying to be so clever about everything. That's the work of the numbness bar. Has changed my life. Phenomenal work.
Yes, because when I started looking into it, you have a video on YouTube on it, and it just made so much sense as to how it's true. It's almost like it goes from zero to boiling, and there's nothing in between, and so there's this void of emotion and feeling. And I love that you made the difference between feelings and emotions. It's been very confused, often interchanged, but yet very different at the same time.
Yeah, I like this quote around that, that feelings are for dealing with what is now, and emotions are for healing the past. Yeah. And you can detect a feeling. It doesn't take longer than 90 seconds or maybe 2 minutes. An emotion has a reverberating vibration in the body that creates a story from the past and projects it into the future. That's an emotion. And
it's like, would you say it's perhaps feelings that didn't get a chance to express get stacked and then they come out later as emotions?
It might kind of stored memories of feelings. And, you know, I'm writing right now a book, and I have a co-writer, and she was asking me in that book, so the same question, are your emotions kind of stored feelings that you could not express in that moment? And he has said this is probably true. And then the question is, so how do they get stored and how do we release them?
Yes.
It's a fantastic question. I just totally love that. This is a complete scientific investigation. How does our feelings getting stored becoming emotion, getting triggered and re-triggered in the right place when we're feeling safe enough or not safe, that we then finally can bring an emotional wave into completion, that we can heal something that we had not the awareness when it happened?
Yes. Like,
It's a good question.
I know. It's such a fascinating question. I've just been reading this book called The Body Keeps Score, and it does
Yeah.
talk about how, trauma gets stored in the body, and it's very similar concepts, but it's fascinating, fascinating.
Yeah.
And so with this concept that you're talking about in terms of like feeling our emotions and really taking ownership as well of them and learning to manage them and not put them on anybody. So you have this 4 agreements map, which I absolutely loved because you know what? I feel like every relationship should be based on these 4 agreements. When I read them, I was like, oh my gosh. But I mean, I don't want to impose my thoughts on anybody, but can you walk us through how this could be so beneficial, or perhaps how these 4 agreements really help create a strong base?
Yes. Before that, I just had something else popping in with
Yes.
the question before, with the stored feelings and emotions, and then I go straight into that. So I'm as well a body worker. So I have as well developed a certain modality around de-armoring and physical release of um, stored emotion and trauma tension in the body. So I do a lot of body work when people want to heal certain body parts where trauma and emotions are stored. So it's a really groundbreaking, transformative work, de-armoring work.
It's incredible. And like the other day, even I went to get a massage and my masseuse is touching me. She's like, oh, I can feel you feel sadness. And I was like, how is she touching my organ? Like she was touching the side and she could feel the sadness. And I was feeling very sad that week. And I was like, this is incredible. So yeah, this is powerful, the work that you're doing with body. So
Yeah. So we can heal that and we can release that. That's what I just wanted to say about that. I'm very passionate about the relationship maps and the 4 agreements. And the way how I came to that is through being in relationship and being in this place of relationship that is assumption based and telepathic agreements. You should
yes.
and you have to, and this is how relationship looks like. And we have all this romantic dream, the kind of Walt Disney Mickey Mouse till it's not Mickey Mouse but Cinderella, till death takes us apart, till ever
Yeah.
after. All this kind
Yeah,
of,
yes, yes. He'll just know, or the right
right.
one will show up, and yeah,
Yeah,
or
right.
they, yeah.
The knight in shining armor, the rescuer, just like
Totally.
getting me out of the misery and just like brings every desire from my unspoken lips. And so the 4 agreements are pretty profound and fundamental, related to the entire work. So that the system that you see there in the background is literally a structure that is 3-dimensional. So when you literally flip the yellow thing on the side, you would literally see a pyramid, right?
Yes.
And this is what the structure of the pyramid is in an ascending way. So you have the foundation, so you have the base. What is this square? And the square is that I'm responsible for my feelings, you're responsible for your feelings. I'm responsible to stay open, you are responsible to stay open. I'm responsible to receive what I need to receive. That means self-care, self-love. you're responsible for self-care, self-love. That's nobody else's business than mine and yours. And that's true for everyone in the world. Yeah? So the base is the first level of relationship, and people need to have that in place in a functional relationship, so that there is an agreement around that. I'm responsible for my feelings and you're responsible for your feelings. Do you agree to that?
Totally.
Yeah, so that you cannot put your feelings into my base, and I cannot put my feelings into your base. I'm responsible for what I feel and you're responsible for what you feel. And just allowing this little agreement makes it really easy in daily life with every one engagement.
Yeah.
Then there comes the second agreement, that is about the permission piece. And I know in my life who I have given permission, and I know in my life who have given me permission. So given permission is very broad about anything, but the main thing is, if I have in my base, so my inflow, so I can do stuff to fill up my cup, if I have that embodied and I can feel myself literally, sensory, if I want to feel my partner, so may I hold your hand, may I kiss you, may I hug you, may I feel you, may I touch you, may I lay on top of you, may I, whatever. So this question about permission. When people have a relationship, they have this assumption-based permission, till somebody doesn't feel it, and then they're feeling abused, and then you have all this kind of shadow stuff going on. But if you ask in a relationship every 5 seconds, may I touch you, may I feel you, may I, it's a total killer.
Yeah.
Nobody want to do that. So the second agreement is, in relationship, in intimate relationship, do I have permission from now on to feel you, touch you with any part of my body, on any part of your body, whenever, however I like, and you take care of your limits? Yeah, I will give you the same permission. You have now permission to touch me with any part on your body, whenever, however you like, on any part of my body, and I take care of my limits. Agreement about that? Verbal agreement. Yes, that sounds good. Great. So I can touch you whenever I want, and if you don't feel it, you just say, I'm not in the mood. But if you want to feel something, you have to reach out and use your body and feel yourself. If you want to feel something, you cannot put it into the other person anymore.
Wow, which is, yes, the foundation.
It's the foundation. So when this permission is clear, then you just go on a journey together, because this is where the mutual feeling with each other is happening, when you have permission with each other, and not assumption-based permission, and not the telepathic agreement. Yeah, we have that now because we had this good night one day, and now we have to be together till da di da di da. So this story dies.
Yes.
The romantic story dies. Then there comes the third agreement is, if I want you to do something for me, I will ask. If I don't ask you, I don't want anything, so don't do anything. If you want me to do something for you, you need to ask. If you don't ask me anything, I'm not doing anything. So you have to ask for what you want me to do.
Oh, I love this one. Yes. I mean, I love them all, but this one's just like, I just see this everywhere. This is powerful.
It's super powerful. So this is the third agreement. And then there comes the fourth agreement. And that's very important, is that when I have recognized myself as that gift that I am, and you have recognized yourself as a gift that you are, then we giving our gift to each other. And what the other person is doing with it is just their choice. I give because I have, I give because I can. What you do with it is your choice. And how do I want to give that gift to the world without needing anything back? How can I express myself in my purpose of life without needing anything, just because I recognize myself as that gift. And if I don't want to give it, I'm just sitting on the couch and that's my business.
Wow.
But as we are all um, radiating loving beings, and we all have a certain function in this life, everybody loves to give their gift.
It's so true. It's like we probably beat for that.
Oh yeah. And this is where it becomes really interesting when you look into the so-called 5 love languages, right?
Yeah. Oh yes. Yes.
What is your love language that you have? What is the gift that you need from your beloved? And what's the gift that you love to give most? And what's the gift that they need? And where is the match and where isn't? And if you need something in specific, please ask. I totally love you. I just want you to be happy. And whatever I can provide, I'm totally happy to do what I can within my limits.
Yes. Oh my goodness. This is just like, I feel like this should be taught in every school, like just foundations. It's like, because it's just such a part of our everyday life and like the relationships. And we go, for some people, they become parents and other things. And it just, without this like clear understanding, it just can become so entangled. And I love what you said, just to continue on that thread about how, in fact, relationships, we've made them into a concept, but really they're an agreement. They're a series of agreements. And I was wondering if you could touch on that a little bit, because I love the way that you phrase that, because I feel like it gives it a lot more freedom and openness for each couple to express themselves as they wish and create agreements that suit them.
Yeah. And I imagine that every relationship or every couple that is building their agreement around that, I think these 4 agreements, they're basics. And in a kind of neurophysiological, emotional understanding of embodiment, this is just the raw material of engaging intimately with other people, to the degree how we want to engage with other people. So if I'm engaging with other people, if people are not willing to look into these 4 agreements, I'm not engaging with people. I'm not interested. Everything else is kindergarten to me. And if people want to grow up, then just like let's create a solid container. And you have to take care of yourself. You have to take responsibility for yourself. That's what adults do. This is the world of the grown-ups. So in this world, then you can expand your container where people say, how do we want to engage with other people? Are we polysensual? Are we polyamory? Are we polysexual? Are we monogam? Are we open in any direction? What does that mean? And that when there are commitments, actually, and this is where it becomes really interesting, that the commitment is not to my partner anymore. I'm not committed to you. I'm committed to the values that I bring into this relating. And on my word and on my commitment to myself, this is where you can measure my integrity about my word and my action.
Oh my God. Wow.
And that's where the difference becomes really profound. And this is where it goes deep.
Yes. Oh my goodness. I feel like we could just talk about just an entire hour on that. That is so true, because it's right now, as I've known it, it's my commitment to somebody else, not as a commitment to me.
Yes. Yeah. It's radical ownership and it's radical self-responsibility.
Yeah, because like, for example, yeah. Oh, anyway, I don't want to dive too much into that, because I know that we've been chatting for a little while. So I just want to really ask you, because I find that today we're so at a war, almost, at least it's been my perception, between the genders and the sexes, and like women want this, men want this. And I know that's not the case for everybody, but you see a lot of that. And sometimes I find it's like one of the biggest things that I'd love to be a part of healing. And so, because you've been a part of this like world for so long with like Tantra, sexuality, healing, trauma, and like energy work, what's your perspective on the so-called differences between men and women, masculine and feminine, and like all these ways of interacting?
I don't know if the world is ready for me.
Oh my God, I'm so excited. I don't know what you're gonna say, but this is
So
exciting.
when you look back into this thing, so there are four different zones in there, right? One is your action, one is their action. This is for you, this is for them.
Got it.
This
Okay.
is a neurological, so on somatic dynamics, a neurological foundation of all human beings. There's none of us is different. We have all the same nervous system, we have all the same engagement system, and we have all the same capacity to give and receive, independent from gender and gender identifications.
Yes.
Doesn't matter what preference we have, in which body we feel we belong to, and what are the other people we want to engage with. We have to own ourselves in there, and the way how we engage with other people is based on our self responsibility about how do we want to engage. But here's one important piece, and that's, I just this is just it's too good. I learned that about 10 years ago. I started with that when I worked with a midwife here in Berlin, um, teaching about cervical de-armoring.
Mm.
So cervical de-armoring was a certain part where, so I learned that in a frame of tantric bodywork. And what she was teaching as a midwife was for women under the process of giving birth, having an ecstatic birth, so that every woman has the capacity to give birth in a natural, organic, ecstatic way. When
Oh.
the contraction pattern of the uterus, of the cervix, so the clenching, holding pattern is released, the fear of pain and the fear of literally death under birth is kind of evaporated, that every woman can go into this place of infinite expansion and orgasmic birth.
Mm.
So that we started to do work with women on the cervical um, de-armoring, that every woman could be ecstatic without giving birth, so
Wow.
that the cervical dynamic and the capacity of expansion through the uterus and the cervix allows every woman to go into the deepest ecstatic orgasmic realm that becomes spiritual.
Mm.
And I was just looking in so many directions. I was just looking up, so how is the connection into the pineal gland, and how is the DMT release, and how is the spiritual connection of a woman to the earth, and the birth giving, and the connection, and how is that all different. And here comes the point. So our social engagement system, the way how we engage and how we determine safety and connection with our people, is based on our ventral vagus nerve.
Okay.
So everything from our upper diaphragm, our facial expression, how we speak, hear, see, we carry our heart in our face. So our personality structure based on oxytocin from the very early development of dynamics of engagement. But there's another part of the vagus nerve complex, the so-called the dorsal part of the vagus nerve, that is connected in the woman's body to the uterus. So
Mm.
there is a vagal connection to the sexual organs, so specifically the cervix and the uterus, into this spiritual experience of unified consciousness. And we man, or being in a man's body, so having our genitals outside the body, man identified, but we don't have a vagus connection to our genitals. And that allows a woman, or being in a woman's body, a complete different neurological wiring that we man, or man identified, or having, well, not man identified, but having the genitals outside, that we don't have. This is a different configuration neurologically. And important to understand why being in a woman's body or having a uterus the sense of safety is so much more profound before it comes to sexual encounter.
Interesting. Wow.
And that's an important piece that most people don't understand. So this is why the sense of relatively safety before it comes to sexual encounter, being in a woman's body or having a womb, is completely different than being in a man's body. Because when we're getting sexually activated, our sympathetic nervous system is getting activated. So we're going into mobilization. Yeah. When a woman is getting sexually activated, the vagus nerve activity, what is parasympathetic, is getting activated, so that the man sympathetic sexual expression can cause already in a woman's body a sense of unsafety.
Wow. Oh my God. This actually explains so much.
Yes, it's phenomenal, right?
Wow. Yes, because I mean, I haven't studied it nearly as much as you, but this feeling of like when a man just comes at you, and although he has the intention of like wanting to come, like, you know, as and I'm talking about heterosexual and like people who identify like cis identified individuals, but even with other partners, but like when he comes at you, there's this sense of like, whoa, there's a contraction. It's fascinating.
So on a deeper level of that is, and it goes much deeper than that, and this is why it becomes really interesting. So we have all, it doesn't matter which gender, it doesn't matter which kind of uh, configuration we carry, we have all this deep desire to be ravished.
Wow.
We have all this deep desire in our nervous system to be to be taken and surrender to a power that is bigger than us.
But then how does that play a role with this connection, with this feeling of safety women, or at least people with a womb feel? How do those play then?
So you cannot surrender if you're not feeling the person who is coming towards you is giving their gift of power to you, so that your state of giving yourself in can only happen when the person in power, so the person in action, is doing their action for your highest benefit, because this person can feel you on the deepest level. And that's the deepest longing in the nervous system to merge that I can find. And specifically, being in this in a woman's body, and just like playing with polarities around that, is that seduction and being an invitation only happens when the other person is in attunement.
Yes, makes sense. Attunement.
Otherwise, it won't work.
So then when people talk about like, masculine, feminine, or polarity rather, I should say, does that is attunement, would you say? That is part of attunement?
Well, I think it's just one part of the coin of polarity. It's the same thing, like you have as well so-called masculine aspects, like I have feminine aspects, and my feminine aspects, they just want to surrender to this higher power that you can provide as your masculine aspect. And the masculine aspect giving the gift of power is as well very underdeveloped in females, as the being in vulnerability and surrender and invitation or in seduction in males, totally underdeveloped. So when we could bring that all together so that there are both parts in myself and both parts in you or in my partner in this case, then we can come together from that place of infinite engagement, because there's always something that two people can do with each other. And then you can bring it back to the dynamics here. Who is doing the action and who is it for? Who is giving? Who is receiving? Who is giving the gift of power?
Wow.
And who is it for?
Well, that is true. That is like so incredibly interesting. So if you were to like really summarize what this finding would really mean to the dynamic in relationship, what would you say it is, like, for people who, for a simplified version, I guess, of what we've just kind of discussed, just to put it onto simpler terms?
I would say stop giving from a conditioned place and find receiving in a sensual way that you know how to fill up your cup. And everything else will fall into place when this is embodied.
Mm. Wow. Oh, this is so exciting. This was such a powerful conversation. And if you had like a few practical tips or exercises that you would recommend to people listening, what would you say? Like, where could they start this journey into somatic consent, in deepening their relationships? Like, what would just be some keys?
Yeah, I think most people just want to start on top, right? And and I would always say just like, that's a great intention. So I've created on the webpage Somatic Consent a free entrance course, and the free entrance course is where everyone can find the inflow dynamic of feeling themselves with their skin.
Mm-hmm.
And then the entire dynamic here, the who is doing the action, who is it for, is based on the 3-minute game from Harry Feddes.
Mm-hmm.
So I've broken it down in an understandable way so that everybody who is going into this free course can activate their sensory inflow and can learn how to play the 3-minute game, that this dynamic becomes their nature. And everything that I've been talking about in the last hour and a half or so is something that is not coming from a book. So don't believe a word that I'm saying. But when you play with these two things that I just described, so the hands and the 3-minute game, everything else that I said will become your own truth from within.
Mm.
And from that place, we can learn to speak another language that is empowering others instead of overpowering others. And I think this is a new kind of landing platform um, of engagement that is just like far beyond this conditioning of patriarchy that we just know today.
I love the way you said that. It's so powerful. It's so true. And I think you even have an app as well. Right?
Yeah.
You've made it really easy for people to start to really embody this practice. So thank you for your work with that. That is so powerful. So is there one thing or one piece of advice you've received in the past that you would give to people listening, that you would repeat yourself?
Hmm. Hmm. No, I would repeat myself. I think I've just given everything that I can share in this
Amazing.
90 minutes. And my invitation is just find your truth into this little free course that I have offered. So all my wisdom is in there. And find yourself, and if it's for you, just make it yours in your life. It's a free offer as an invitation, and nobody has to go any further than that. They don't want to.
Wow. Matt, thank you so much for your time, your words, your sharing your wisdom and your journey with us. It's been so powerful to have you here with us. There's been a lot of learning and growing together. So thank you for your time, and thank you for your gift, for sharing your gift with us.